Hello, boys and girls. It's Mr. Polson. I have decided to continue our story time, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a chapter a day and post the chapter to YouTube, to my YouTube channel. So whenever you get a chance, you can go ahead and read or listen to story time. Last time we had story time, we were just finishing up the book, Little House on the Prairie. Strike that, reverse it. Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And remember, the setting of this book was right across the Mississippi River, right across Lake Pepin in Wisconsin. Remember, Plainview is about right here, and this book took place right over here in Wisconsin. This is Minnesota, and this is Wisconsin. And remember, this book took place in the 1860s, right after the Civil War was finished. We finished this book before we left school for our little extended time away, and what ended up happening in this book was Laura was laying in bed listening to Pa play his fiddle, and she was falling asleep. And remember, we just read the chapter, we just got done learning about how Pa went hunting, but he didn't shoot the deer because they were so beautiful. So now we're done with this book. Now we're going to move on to the next book. Now there are about 9 books in this series, Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and we're going to go on to the second one now. And again, this is the story of Laura's and her family's life growing up in the 1860s. And as you can see, I've got baby Susan here with me to follow along. We wanted to make sure you all got to see baby Susan. Baby Susan's doing well, by the way. Now, if you would like to read along, I will show you exactly where you are every day. I'll just read the book, and I'll have the pages here for you to see. This is what the cover looks like. Now, there's many different covers of this book, because it's been out for almost 100 years now. About 85 years. It's getting to be as close to 96 as I am. I'm actually going to be 97, so this book is almost as old as I am. So if you want to go ahead and follow along, you don't have to, but I know the public library has some copies of this book, and I bet some of you might even have copies at home. So if you'd like to follow along, please feel free. All right, we're going to start on chapter 1. It's on page 1, and it looks like this. A long time ago, when all the grandfathers and grandmothers of today were little boys and little girls, or very small babies, or perhaps not even born, Pa and Ma and Laura and baby Carrie left their house in the big woods of Wisconsin. They drove away and left it lonely and empty in a clearing among the big trees, and they never saw that little house again. They were going to the Indian country. So this book starts with the Ingalls family leaving their home in Wisconsin, and they are going to the Indian country, is what they called it back in these days. Remember, this is the 1860s now. Pa said there were too many people in the big woods now. Quite often, Laura heard the ringing thud of an axe, which was not Pa's axe, or the echo of a shot that did not come from his gun. The path that went by the little house had become a road. Almost every day, Laura and Mary stopped their playing and stared in surprise at a wagon slowly creeping up on that road. Wild animals could not stay in a country where there were so many people. People did not like to stay either. Pa did not like to stay either. He liked the country where the wild animals lived without being afraid. He liked to see the little fawns and their mothers looking at him from the shadowy woods, and the fat, lazy bears eating berries in the wild berry patches. In the long winter evenings, he talked to Ma about the western country. In the west, the land was level, and there were no trees. The grass grew thick and high. There the wild animals wandered and fed as though they were in a pasture that stretched much farther than a man could see. And there were no settlers. Only Indians lived there. Now, boys and girls, settlers are people that moved into new parts of the country. For instance, right now, the Ingalls lived in Wisconsin. Settlers are people that moved west. And the only people, we learned this, the only people that lived in the western United States at this time were Native Americans or Indians. So Pa wanted to go to a place where there weren't so many settlers. And we call that area, it's called back in these days, the frontier. Nowadays, there's many, many people that live in these places, and there's cities and roads. But back in Laura's day, there were no cities and there were no roads. Again, the only people that lived in the western part of the United States were the Native Americans or Indians. And believe it or not, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, or Iowa, those were considered western parts of the United States at the time. We were still a very young country. One day, in the very last of the winter, Pa said to Ma, "Seeing you don't object, I've decided to go see the West. I've had an offer for this place, and we can sell it for now for as much as we're ever likely to get. Enough to give us a start in a new country." "Oh, Charles, must we go now?" Ma said. The weather was so cold, and the snug house was so comfortable. "If we are going this year, we must go now," said Pa. "We can't get across the Mississippi after the ice breaks." Now, boys and girls, remember, Laura and her Ma and Pa and Mary and Carrie live in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, to get out of Wisconsin, you have to go across the Mississippi River. And back in these days, there were no bridges. Nowadays, we can go to Red Wing, we can go to Wabasha, we can go to Winona, we can go to La Crosse. There's bridges that cross the Mississippi River. But back in these days, there were no bridges. So the only way you could get across the Mississippi River was in the winter when the Lake Pepin, which is part of the Mississippi River, was frozen, or when the Mississippi River was frozen. So they had to go in the winter when it was very cold, while the Mississippi River was still frozen. So Pa sold the little house. He sold the cow and the calf. He made hickory boughs and fastened them upright to the wagon box. Ma helped him stretch white canvas over them. So, boys and girls, what they're talking about is Pa took sticks and bent them over like this, and then they put cloth over that, and then their wagon looked like this. This protected them from the sun and the rain. You can kind of see in this picture here, those are the wagon boughs. It's basically a bent over stick, a hickory stick. In the thin dark before morning, Ma gently shook Mary and Laura till they got up. In the firelight and candlelight, she washed and combed them and dressed them warmly. Over their red flannel underwear, she put wool petticoats and wool dresses and long wool stockings. She put their coats on them and their rabbit skin hoods and their red yarn mittens. Now, boys and girls, when you go on a trip in the winter, you don't have to put all those things on, do you? Because we have cars that we can go in and have heaters. But if you look at this wagon here, boys and girls, there's no heater in there. Look at that. All that air goes right through the wagon. So it gets very, very cold in there. And cloth does not do a very good job, as you know, of keeping out the cold. So they have to put on all that stuff just so they could stay warm as they traveled. We get baby Susan. There you go. There's baby Susan. Everything from the little house was in the wagon, except the beds and tables and chairs. They did not need to take these, because Pa could always make new ones. There was thin snow on the ground. The air was still and cold and dark. The bare trees stood up against the frosty stars, but in the east the sky was pale, and through the gray woods came lanterns with wagons and horses, bringing Grandpa and Grandma and aunts and uncles and cousins. Now, boys and girls, did you hear what Laura said? They packed everything they had into this one wagon. Can you imagine putting your whole house in that one wagon? Mary and Laura clung tight to their rag dolls. Now, don't get jealous, baby Susan. It's okay. They did not say anything. The cousins stood around and looked at them. Grandma and all the aunts hugged and kissed them, and hugged and kissed them again, saying goodbye. Pa hung his gun to the wagon bows inside the canvas top, where he could reach it quickly from the seat. He hung his bullet pouch and powder horn beneath it. He laid the fiddle box carefully between pillows, where jolting would not hurt the fiddle. Now, I remember from Little House in the Big Woods, Pa had to have his gun for two reasons. He had to have it for protection from wild animals, and he also had to have it so they could get food. That's how they had meat to eat, by Pa going hunting. The uncles helped him hitch the horses to the wagon. All the cousins were told to kiss Mary and Laura, so they did. Pa picked up Mary and then Laura and set them on the bed in the back of the wagon. He helped Ma climb up to the wagon seat, and Grandma reached up and gave her baby Carrie. Pa swung up and sat beside Ma, and Jack, the brindle bulldog, went underneath the wagon. So they all went away from the little log house. The shutters were over the windows, so the little house could not see them go. It stayed there inside the log fence behind the two big oak trees that in the summertime had made green roofs for Mary and Laura to play under. And that was the last of the little playhouse. Pa promised that when they came to the west, Laura would see a papoose. "What is a papoose?" she asked him. And he said, "A papoose is a little brown Indian baby." They drove a long way through the snowy woods till they came to the town of Pepin. Now remember, boys and girls, we talked about this. A lot of you have been to the town of Pepin. Pepin is a town that's only about 30 miles from Plainview. Plainview is about right here, and Pepin's about right, Plainview is about right here, and Pepin's about right here. So it's very, very close. Remember, Pepin is the place where Laura and Mary saw a store for the first time. It was the first time they ever saw a town. It was the first time they had ever seen a place that had houses next to each other. And it's the place where Laura and Mary got a piece of candy from the storekeeper. So Pepin was mentioned a lot in the first book, Little House in the Big Woods. Remember, that's where Pa went to go fishing, and he brought back a wagon load of fish. And then we talked about this as well. A lot of you have probably been to the town of Pepin. You might have gone on your boat there. A lot of people go there to eat. There's a restaurant there called the Pickle Factory that a lot of families go to eat at. There's another restaurant in Pepin that a lot of people go to for ice cream. Mary and Laura had seen it once before, but it looked different now. The door of the store and the doors of all the houses were shut. The stumps were covered with snow, and no little children were playing outdoors. Big cords of wood stood among the stumps. Only 2 or 3 men in boots and fur caps and bright red plaid coats were to be seen. Now, why do you suppose that they don't see too many people? Because it's so cold out. Ma and Laura and Mary ate bread and molasses in the wagon, and the horses ate corn from the nose bags. While inside the store, Pa traded his furs for things they would need on the journey. They could not stay long in the town, because they must cross the lake that day. And again, boys and girls, remember, Pa does not use money to buy things. he uses his furs. He trades